Let me bring you back to the north part of town and get you the details on the weekend construction closure. I-17 northbound will shut down at Jomax this weekend, all weekend long, Friday night until early Monday morning. Traffic will be forced off at Jomax. You can get right back on the freeway at Jomax as well. However, then from Jomax up to the Loop 303, the traffic will be pared down all to one lane. So maybe you've noticed the past several months, we have had quite a few closures here on the I-17 in the north part of town. We want to talk about exactly why and what's going on with Doug Ninsel from the Arizona Department of Transportation. Good friend of mine for a very long time. Doug, great to see you this morning. First of all, can you define the parameters of this project in particular and what exactly you guys are doing up here?
Yeah, for the project, Gina, it is that we're doing the pavement improvement work, and what that has entailed is the removal of the old asphalt pavement and also the diamond grinding of the concrete surface that's here along I-17. So crews are doing that work, but one of the reasons for the weekend closures has been recently they are replacing the bridge deck joints along the freeway, and of course they stretch along the entire width of the freeway. That's why we have to have the weekend closures. So we're asking drivers, of course, to think ahead, do some things that they might be able to do to avoid the closure, whether it's traveling early in the morning, later at night, when the traffic volume is lighter. Some of the things that we're asking drivers to do. And one of the things is we're asking drivers not to go onto the streets in the neighborhoods next to the freeway, because that winds up being a recipe for heavy backups, and it doesn't get you anywhere once that traffic gets bogged down in the neighborhood. So stick with the primary detour, which really is taking I-17 up and over at the Jomax ramps and getting right back down onto the freeway.
Yeah, and then if you're coming from the far west side of town, the Loop 303, or from the east side, maybe you can come up to Cave Creek and the Carefree Highway and cut across. Doug, can you help us understand what diamond grinding is?
Well, diamond grinding is a process where some specialized machines are used. Those machines have diamond-tipped blades on rotating drums, and what they do is they take off a small amount of the concrete surface, but it freshens, if that's the word that could be used, but it really renews the concrete surface along the freeway so that it's a nice smooth ride for the drivers. It also puts some small grooves in there too, from a standpoint of noise reduction along any particular freeway. So that's the way the process works.
You know, this project is different than the widening project for the I-17. Can you quickly just update us on that project? And that's basically what, Anthem North, right?
That's exactly right. That's the project in between Anthem Way and Sunset Point. It is the different project. They're doing really well in terms of the widening work that's taking place there. The addition of the extra lane, a third lane in each direction between Anthem Way and the Black Canyon City area. And then north of there, what's really going to be focused on in the next year is completing the flex lanes that are being built along I-17 in between Black Canyon City and the Sunset Point rest area. Those flex lanes are their own separate two-lane facility. That's going to allow us to really increase the traffic capacity along I-17.
Sounds good. Can't wait for that. Doug Ninsel, always great to see you, my friend. Wishing you and everybody at ADOT safety, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah.